The ring wasn't just any ring. It was the one I had buried with my husband, Daniel, 3 years ago. It sat in the palm of my hand, cold and heavy with impossible questions, a solid gold band of betrayal nestled in a dusty, velvet-lined box at the back of my daughter-in-law's closet. Chloe's voice echoed in my head, sharp and dismissive from earlier that morning. "Please, Helen, just don't go in my closet. It's a mess, and I value my privacy." Privacy. Was this what she was protecting? A secret so monstrous it defied all logic? My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in the cage of my chest. I had seen the undertaker close the casket. I had placed that ring on Daniel's finger myself, my final touch, my last whispered goodbye. How could it be here? Comment on which city you're watching and subscribe to the channel because I guarantee there's more to this story than meets the eye. The world tilted on its axis. My hand trembled, and for a moment, I thought I might drop the box. I sank down onto the guest room bed, which had been my reluctant home for the past 3 weeks since my fall. The room was small and sterile, painted a bland beige that seemed to suck all the color out of my life. It was a room for a visitor, an outsider, and I had never felt more like one than I did right now. My son, Mark, had insisted I come stay with them while my hip healed. "Mom, you can't be alone," he'd said, his face etched with worry. "Chloe and I want you here. We'll take care of you." But Chloe's welcome had felt as thin as a lace doily, fragile and full of holes. Her smiles didn't reach her eyes, and her every action seemed to scream that I was an intruder in her perfectly curated life. Her warning about the closet had been the final, stinging proof. I had only been looking for an extra blanket. The nights in their modern, minimalist house were colder than in my cozy little home filled with 50 years of memories. When I found the closet door slightly ajar, I hadn't hesitated. I was his mother, after all, not a stranger. But what I found was not a blanket. It was a ghost. A solid gold ghost that proved my daughter-in-law was either a grave robber or something far, far worse. A knot of ice formed in my stomach. I carefully closed the box, the little snap of the lid sounding like a gunshot in the silent house. I tucked it back where I'd found it, behind a stack of shoe boxes filled with expensive heels she rarely wore. Then I closed the closet door, my mind a whirlwind of horror and confusion. I had to know. I had to understand how Daniel's ring, my Daniel's ring, had found its way from 6 feet under the earth into the darkness of his son's wife's closet. My days took on a new, terrible purpose. I became a detective in my own son's house, my Cain my only accomplice. I watched Chloe with the sharp, focused intensity of a hawk. Every move she made, every word she uttered was a potential clue. She was a creature of habit and precision. Her coffee was always brewed at 7:05 a.m. Her keys were always placed in the small ceramic bowl by the door. Her life seemed to be a fortress of routine, and I was determined to find the cracks in its walls. She would leave for her job as a paralegal, her heels clicking in authoritative rhythm on the hardwood floors, and I would begin my quiet investigation. But she was careful. Too careful. Her phone was always password protected. Her laptop snapped shut the moment I entered a room. The tension between us thickened until it was a tangible thing, a suffocating fog in the air. We'd sit at the dinner table, the silence punctuated only by the clinking of our forks. Mark, my dear, oblivious son, would try to bridge the gap. "Mom, Chloe was telling me about a new case at work." "Sounds fascinating." Chloe would offer a tight, brittle smile. "Mark, I doubt your mother is interested in corporate litigation." The implication was clear. You don't belong in our world. You don't understand. It stung, cutting deeper than she could ever know. Because right now, I was trying to understand something so dark and twisted it made corporate litigation look like a fairy tale. I was trying to understand her one afternoon. While she was at work, I felt a surge of desperate bravery. I went back to the closet, my heart pounded as I pushed aside her clothes. The scent of her perfume, a sharp, floral scent I'd always found too aggressive. Filling my senses, I reached for the box again. But my fingers brushed against something else, tucked behind it a small, leather-bound journal. My breath hitched. This had to be it. I pulled it out. My hands shaking so badly I could barely open it. The pages were filled with Chloe's neat, slanted handwriting. It wasn't a diary of emotions, but a ledger, dates, numbers, cryptic notes. I scanned the pages, my eyes catching on a date from 2.5 years ago. Just 6 months after Daniel had passed next to it was a name I didn't recognize, V. Costas, and a number that made me gasp $20,000. What followed were a series of smaller entries. Week after week. Extra hours, Franklin Project. Weekend work, Myers Deposition. Followed by payment amounts. It was a meticulous record of earnings and payments, all funneled toward that single, massive debt. A cold dread washed over me. This wasn't just about a ring, this was about money. A lot of money. Was Chloe being blackmailed? Did this V. Costas have something on her? The ring must be a part of it, the collateral, but how did it connect to Daniel? My mind raced, trying to piece together a puzzle where every piece was sharp and jagged. I remembered Daniel's final months, the sickness eating away at him. He'd been so worried. But I thought it was just about leaving me alone. I flashed back to a conversation we'd had a few weeks before he died. We were sitting on the porch swing, the evening air warm and sweet. "Helen," he'd said, his voice weaker than I'd ever heard it. "I'm so sorry. For everything." I had squeezed his hand. "Sorry for what, my love?" "You've given me the most beautiful life." He had just looked away, a single tear tracing a path down his hollowed cheek. At the time, I thought it was the sorrow of parting. Now, I wondered if it was the weight of a secret. I put the ledger back, my mind spinning. I needed to talk to Mark. He was my son. He would help me make sense of this. That evening, I waited until Chloe had gone to take a bath. I found Mark in the living room, scrolling through his phone, the blue light illuminating his tired face. He looked so much like his father. "Mark, honey," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk." "It's about Chloe." He sighed, not looking up from his phone. "Mom, please. Don't start. I know you two aren't best friends, but she's under a lot of stress at work. Just try to get along." His dismissal felt like a slap. "No, you don't understand," I pressed, my voice rising with urgency. "She's in some kind of trouble. I found something. Something about a man named Costas and a lot of money." That got his attention. He looked up, his eyes wide with an emotion I couldn't quite place. It wasn't surprise. It was fear. "What are you talking about?" he asked, his voice low and tense. "Where did you hear that name?" I saw it then, in the way his jaw clenched, the way he avoided my gaze. He knew. My son knew what was going on, and he was hiding it from me. The foundation of my world, already cracked, began to crumble. "Mark, you know him, don't you?" I whispered. "What is going on in this house?" He stood up abruptly, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, you've been through a lot. Your fall, the grief. You're getting confused. You're imagining things. There's no Costas. You must have misheard something on the TV. He was gaslighting me. My own son was trying to make me think I was losing my mind." The betrayal was so profound, so complete, it stole the air from my lungs. He was protecting her. He had chosen his wife over his own mother. I felt a cold, hard anger crystallize in my chest. If he wouldn't help me, I would find the truth on my own. The next few days were a silent war. I retreated into myself, my conversations with Mark and Chloe becoming clipped and superficial. I was playing a role, the frail, slightly confused old woman, while my mind worked furiously. I needed to know more about this V. Costas. Armed with the name from Chloe's ledger, I used the old tablet Mark had given me to keep in touch with my church friends. My fingers, stiff with arthritis, fumbled on the screen, but I was determined. I typed the name into the search bar. The results were chilling. Vincent Costas was a known figure in the city's underbelly, a loan shark with a reputation for ruthless collection methods. The articles about him were vague, full of legal jargon and whispers of connections to organized crime. He preyed on the desperate. Why on earth would Chloe, a successful paralegal, be involved with a man like this? The ring. It had to be the ring. Maybe Daniel hadn't bought it from a respectable jeweler like he'd told me. Maybe it was worth a fortune and Costas wanted it. But that didn't make sense. It was a simple gold band. Sentimental value, yes, but its monetary value was modest. Unless there was something else. Something about Daniel. I let my mind drift back again, searching for clues I had missed. Daniel had been a salesman, a good one. He provided a comfortable life for us. But there were times he was stressed, times he'd come home late, smelling of stale cigar smoke and something I could only describe as fear. He'd always had a plausible explanation, a difficult client, a long drive. I had always believed him. Had I been a fool? Had my perfect marriage been a carefully constructed lie? My suspicion of Chloe began to shift, to morph into something more complex. If she was paying off a dangerous man, she wasn't a villain. She was a victim. But she and Mark were lying to me, treating me like a child. The dishonesty was what hurt the most. One evening, I decided to force the issue. I accidentally left a jewelry catalog open on the coffee table, turned to a page of men's wedding bands. When Chloe came home, I saw her eyes flick to it. Her posture stiffened. "Thinking of getting a new piece of jewelry, Helen?" she asked, her tone dripping with false sweetness. "Oh no, dear," I said, my voice intentionally frail. "I was just looking." It reminded me of Daniel's ring. Such a simple, beautiful band. It's a comfort to know he's still wearing it, that it's with him always. The effect was instantaneous and profound. All the color drained from Chloe's face. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. Her hand flew to her throat, and for a second, I thought she might be sick. "That's a morbid thought," she stammered, turning away quickly to hang up her coat. It wasn't just guilt I saw in her eyes. It was pure, unadulterated terror. She wasn't afraid of me. She was afraid of the memory itself. The pieces were starting to connect in my mind, forming a picture so ugly I could barely stand to look at it. Daniel, Costas, the money, the ring. It all led back to the one place I didn't want to go, my husband's grave. Subscribe now, you won't believe the twist that's coming. The idea was so grotesque, so unthinkable, that I tried to push it away. But it clung to me, a sticky, venomous thought. Had they dug him up? Had they pried the ring from his cold finger to pay a debt? I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grip the arm of my chair. And Mark, my son, his fear, his lies, his desperation to keep me from the truth. He had to be involved. The thought of my gentle, kind-hearted son committing such a desecration. It was a wound far deeper than any broken hip. I had to confront them. I couldn't live in this house of whispers and shadows for another minute. The truth, no matter how monstrous, was better than this agonizing uncertainty. That night, I waited. I sat in the dark of my room, the heavy silence of the house pressing in on me. I heard Mark and Chloe's muffled voices from their bedroom down the hall. An argument, it sounded like. Her voice was sharp and pleading. His was low and weary. Then, silence. I waited another hour, my resolve hardening with every tick of the clock. Finally, I pushed myself up, my hip groaning in protest. I didn't need my cane. Adrenaline was my crutch now. I walked to their room and knocked, my knuckles rapping sharply on the wood. The door opened a crack. It was Mark. His face was pale, his eyes red-rimmed. "Mom? What's wrong? Are you okay? We need to talk," I said, my voice steely. "All three of us." Now, I pushed past him into the room. Chloe was sitting on the edge of the bed, her face buried in her hands. She was wearing a silk robe, but she looked as though she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. I walked over to her closet, the one she had forbidden me from entering. I didn't hesitate. I swung the door open, reached behind the shoeboxes, and pulled out the velvet box. I walked back to the center of the room and opened it, holding it out for them to see. The simple gold band gleamed under the soft lamplight. "I believe you have something to explain," I said, my voice shaking with a rage and grief so profound it felt like it could tear me apart. Chloe let out a choked sob, a sound of utter despair. Mark just stared at the ring, his face a mask of defeat. "Mom, please," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You don't understand." "Then make me understand," I cried, the sound ripping from my throat. "Make me understand how my husband's wedding ring, the ring I buried with him, is in your wife's closet. Did you dig up his grave? Did you rob your own father?" The accusation hung in the air, vile and heavy. Chloe looked up, her face streaked with tears. "No, it wasn't like that." She started, but her voice failed her. It was Mark who finally broke the silence. He sank onto the foot of the bed, his head in his hands. He looked broken, a stranger in the body of my son. "Dad had a secret, Mom," he said, his voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear. "A bad one. He was a gambler. The words didn't register at first. Daniel? My Daniel, who balanced his checkbook to the penny, who saved for our retirement with a diligence that bordered on obsessive. It was impossible. No, I said, shaking my head. No, you're lying. You're trying to protect her. I'm not lying, Mark said, his voice gaining a raw, ragged strength. He hid it from you. He hid it from everyone. He wasn't just playing poker with his buddies. He was in deep. He owed money to very bad people. To Vincent Costas. The name landed like a punch to the gut. It was true. All of it. When he got sick, Mark continued, his voice thick with unshed tears, he knew he couldn't pay it back. The debt was. It was huge, Mom. He told me a week before he died. He made me promise not to tell you. He wanted you to remember him as the man you loved, not as a failure. I stared at him, my mind reeling. 50 years of marriage, a lifetime of memories, all of it suddenly recast in a new, sickening light. The late nights, the stress I had mistaken for work, his final, desperate apology. It was all a lie. A beautiful, carefully constructed lie. After he died, Mark said, his voice dropping to a whisper, Costas came looking for the money. He came to me. He said if I didn't pay, he would. He would come after you. He knew where you lived. He knew you were alone. A cold terror, colder than any I had felt before, seized me. I could picture it, a strange car parked on my quiet street, a shadow at my window. The life I thought was safe, my peaceful widowhood, had been a breath away from being shattered. Mark and I. We used all our savings. Chloe spoke up, her voice trembling. We sold my car. We took out a second mortgage on this house, but it wasn't enough. Costas was getting impatient. Mark looked at me then, his eyes filled with a pain so deep it mirrored my own. He wanted one more thing, he said. He knew Dad had been buried with his wedding ring. He said it was a matter of principle. A final payment. I finally understood. The full, horrifying weight of the truth crashed down on me. I looked at my son, at the fine lines of exhaustion around his eyes, at the gray hairs at his temples that hadn't been there 3 years ago. I looked at the daughter-in-law I had resented and despised. And I saw not villains, but two people who had been pushed to an impossible choice. You did it, I whispered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. You went to the cemetery. Mark couldn't speak. He just nodded, a single tear finally escaping and tracing a path down his cheek. He had desecrated his own father's grave to protect me. He had carried this horrific secret, this terrible act, for 3 years to shield me from the ugliness of the truth about the man I loved and the danger he had left behind. And Chloe. I looked at her, and the ledger in her closet finally made sense. The money, I said, my voice barely audible. The $20,000. You paid him back. Chloe nodded, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. I couldn't let him keep it, she said. Costas sold it to a pawn shop downtown. It took me 2.5 years of working every extra hour I could get, every weekend, but I saved enough. I bought it back a few months ago. I was hiding it. I was so ashamed, Helen. I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid you would hate us forever. I was afraid the truth would destroy you. Her sharp edges, her coldness, her secrets, they hadn't been weapons against me. They were a shield. A heavy, burdensome shield she had carried to protect the memory of a man she barely knew, for the sake of a son she loved and a mother-in-law she was terrified of hurting. I collapsed onto the bed next to Mark, the ring box falling from my grasp. The ring rolled out, coming to a stop on the plush carpet. It didn't look like a symbol of love anymore. It was a symbol of sacrifice, of a terrible, secret debt paid in ways I could never have imagined. My perfect marriage, my perfect husband, my perfect life, it was all an illusion. Daniel had left behind a legacy of fear and debt. But my son and his wife, they had left me a legacy of fierce, painful, unconditional love. They had descended into a nightmare to keep my dreams intact. The anger I had felt was gone, washed away by a tidal wave of grief and a profound, aching love for the two people in front of me. We sat there, the three of us, surrounded by the wreckage of our family secrets. And for the first time in 3 years, we began to cry together. The days that followed were quiet and gentle. The suffocating tension in the house was gone, replaced by a fragile, tentative peace. We talked. For hours, we talked. Mark told me about the night he went to the cemetery. A story he recounted with such pain that I had to hold his hand, my own tears flowing freely for the boy he had been and the man he had been forced to become. Chloe told me about the humiliation of dealing with Costas, the exhaustion of working 2 jobs, the constant fear that I would find out. They had carried this burden together, a silent pact that had nearly crushed them. In their confession, I saw not weakness or deceit, but a strength I had never recognized. I had seen Chloe as a cold, materialistic stranger who had stolen my son. Now I saw her as a warrior who had fought a silent, lonely battle for my family. My hip healed, but I didn't rush to go back to my little house. It felt empty now, haunted by the ghost of a man I realized I never truly knew. The home I needed was right here, with my son and the daughter who had earned my love and respect in the most painful way imaginable. One sunny afternoon, Chloe and I were sitting in the garden. She had planted roses for me, the same pale yellow variety Daniel used to grow. "I don't know what to do with it," I said softly, touching the ring, which I now wore on a chain around my neck, tucked under my blouse. It felt too heavy to wear on my finger. "It's not his anymore. It's not even really mine. It feels like it belongs to you and Mark." Chloe reached out and placed her hand over mine. Her touch, which I had once flinched from, was now a comfort. "It belongs to our family, Helen," she said. "It's a reminder, not of the lies, but of how far we'll go to protect each other." In that moment, I understood. The past could not be changed. The gilded memories of my marriage were tarnished forever. But the present, this messy, complicated, painful, and beautiful present, was real. The love was real. I looked at this woman, my daughter, and saw not the source of my conflict, but the architect of my peace. We had found our way back to each other through a labyrinth of secrets. The truth hadn't destroyed me. It had set me free. It had shattered the perfect image of the past, but in its place, it had given me a future, a real family forged not in perfection, but in the fires of a terrible, beautiful sacrifice. Comment which part of the story left you speechless.